So really, they're just doubling down on the wrong message to begin with, that you're going to eventually get there just by sheer will. Like,
we're measuring based on not clicks anymore, not impressions. It's about how many meetings can we actually set up.
Hello and welcome to the Health Tech Marketing Show. I'm your host, Adam Chirinas. I'm the CEO of Health Launchpad. We're one of the presenting sponsors of this show, and Health Launchpad is the pipeline growth company for B2B healthcare technology. As always, a huge thank you to you for listening. And if you haven't already done so, please hit the follow or subscribe button on whatever app you're using. It's great to be building a following, and we'd really appreciate it if you would do the same. And a big thank you to our friends at Healthcare Now Radio, the 24/7 healthcare-only online radio network. They have a phenomenal podcast syndication service that's done wonders for extending the reach of the show. We're so grateful to Roberta and Carol for everything you do. Now, today's episode is a little different. I recorded two separate interviews on the same topic, ABM, account-based marketing, with two guests who come at it from a different vantage point, but with one big thing in common, which is they both come from sales. So normally I talk to marketing people about ABM. This is actually one of the rare occasions when I'm talking to a couple of sales leaders on their perspectives on ABM. So the first person you're going to hear is Clint Mooneyham. He's the VP of Sales at Sagility, and they're a healthcare operations company that works with payers and providers on specialized business process management. They work with contact centers, claims processing, back office, the full range of services in that area. Clint has 15 years of sales and 9 of those in healthcare. And he has a perspective on ABM that I think will surprise some people. It's very thoughtful. He's not a skeptic, but he is someone who'll slow you down before you start, and for a very good reason. My other guest is Tony Mancuso, who is on the growth team at Onymos, which is a Series A AI startup focused on diagnostic labs and precision medicine. They have tens of thousands of potential customers. And Tony has built one of the most disciplined approaches to account selection and ABM execution that I've come across. And he did it from scratch in a startup with limited resources. It's a really interesting and impressive what he's done. What struck me with both of them is how well these perspectives actually fit together. Clint asks whether you're ready to do ABM. Tony shows you how to do it once you are. So I've pulled 5 themes across these conversations, and you're going to hear from Clint and Tony on each one of these. So let's start with theme number 1. Is ABM even right for you? And first up is Clint.
That's a good question. I think you can ask some basic questions right out of the gate. And so some of this will dovetail into general go-to-market strategy type stuff. But I think when you're putting together account-based marketing plans across the sales or the marketing side, you should really ask yourself, how competitive are you before you even go into that? And what I mean by that is I feel like sometimes ABM strategy is made at a level, or decisions are made at such a level above middle management sales or middle management marketing, and sometimes you don't get the right input from the people that have boots on the ground or really understand the marketing day to day or what's going on in the marketplace. So let me give you a practical example.
Yeah.
If your CEO or maybe a board member is coming to sales and marketing and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if we cracked into XYZ? Let's just say if you're selling to payers, you're going after the Moby Dick, the United Health Group. Sometimes you take ambition aside, it's a lot harder to actually execute on that account-based marketing plan if you're not getting all the right input from the people that are going to be doing that, the physical executors of that plan. So the question of sometimes why does account-based marketing not, actually come through, or what are the challenges as it relates to that? I think one of the very first things you have to think about is how practical is it for you to execute? How competitive are you before you even begin to do anything tactically with the account-based marketing plan? And you really want the input of your generals, the people that have boots on the ground, your VPs of sales or your marketing directors, and not have that decision sort of dictated at a level where it's like, yeah, it would be great to get that person, but the motions to execute and actually get that pay your customer in that example are not going to look and feel like what, decisions are probably made at that level, if that makes any sense.
It does. And so then what happens? As everybody sort of go through the motions, we know where this is going to end up, or what happens?
Well, I think if you have the right alignment and you're having realistic conversations at an executive level, at a middle management, sales and marketing level, I think the very next thing that you'd probably want to do, everybody talks about, buyer intent data. And some of the conversations that I get brought into are when to use that. And I think this is also kind of clearing the first hurdle before you even put the ABM strategy in place. Again, are you competitive? Are you on the radar of these organizations that you're about to launch into? Yeah. And everything we're talking about is sort of assuming a net new prospect, not an existing customer, because that's a different motion. So I think using buyer intent, big data aggregators like 6sense or Demandbase or insert whoever out there to look for things like search terms, SEO, browser history, if they're actually searching or on your website, if any of that information is available, if you're not cookied. I mean, those are the types of things that you really want to get a sense of. If we do this and we put this plan in place, this is going to be probably a big undertaking from sales and marketing. There are going to be resources and a whole motion put in place. You really want to know that at the end of that, you weren't sort of playing a rigged game from the beginning.
So very interesting what you said about intent data. Yeah. So how would you use that earlier on to answer the question, should we do this?
So that's the catch-22, in my opinion, because I think a lot of organizations, particularly maybe smaller organizations with limited resources, would look at, a 6sense or a Demandbase is an expensive tool. We can get that after we have our ABM program, we get our first whatever. I think if you make the investment or you even find ways to get access to that data early on, you may save yourself so much work down the line because you sort of know up front, okay, I've got a net new customer. We're going to build this account-based marketing plan around it. It looks like they're searching for terms for our products and services, or they've got some cookied information of people that have already been on our website. This isn't, a pipe dream. We can do this. And we now have kind of the first hurdle cleared to be able to go and do that. And so, I see organizations that want to use buyer intent data as part of account-based marketing, and they're looking at it so much further down the process of, okay, we're already in motion on this. Who's actually on our website? Who's searching for our terms? If you sort of flip that paradigm and just put that at the beginning of it, then it's like, it could be a really good use of time and resources, in my opinion.
Clint is essentially asking you to earn the right to build an ABM program before you touch a single tactic. Are you competitive? Is the market timing right? Can you actually unseat the incumbent? And critically, have you validated with intent signals before you invest in the full motion? And if you haven't, you may, as he puts it, be playing a rigged game from the beginning. So let's say you've cleared those hurdles, you've decided ABM is the right call. Now comes the question that trips up almost everybody, every company that tries it. Who exactly are you going after? And as we say, start with who. Tony Mancuso from Onymos has one of the most concrete answers to that questions I've heard. He started with tens of thousands of accounts in his total available market and built a disciplined system for getting down to the 20 that get his full attention. And here's how he does it. So let's hear from Tony.
So the way I would look at it is, how are you going to identify the top companies that would be best for your company and why do you want them as a customer? And then from there, creating an individual strategy for that one company. So that one company is going to have its own unique marketing strategy. And that is a true account-based marketing, not just ICP-based marketing.
Okay, but for a company like you guys where there are so many labs, how do you come up with a list? Because we believe in the principle of start with who, not start with why, start with who when it comes to ABM. And more often than not, the reason why a company can't get off the ground with ABM is for exactly what you described, which is we can't get the salespeople to decide on the target account list.
Yep.
How do you create a discipline around that?
It comes back to the key differentiators and the value that you bring to the customers. And then from there, you work backward and say, okay, if this is my differentiation, if this is the value I bring, which customers would care about that more? And which compelling events or trigger events do I want to track? And so from there, you could build a good hypothesis on, okay, these are the top accounts. And then you validate it. And sometimes you're not always right, but it's important that you still need to validate that hypothesis as well.
That makes perfect sense. Let's break it down a bit. So figuring out the best fit, the ones that are best fit. So you might take, I don't know how many accounts are in your total available market?
Quite a bit. There's tens of thousands, right?
Tens of thousands.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you get from tens of thousands down to what does your target account list look like?
Right now I have it at about 100, but key focus is 20.
20.
Yeah.
But that's 100 is 1% of 10,000.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you get rid of, forget about the 20, but because get there next. How do you say, hey, this 99%, we're not focusing on those?
Yeah.
Because that's, if anybody who hasn't thought about this for a half a second, it's like what you're doing is you are placing a bet. It's saying, we're placing a bet on this 1%. It's like if you've got 100, if you're betting on a horse race with 100 horses on it, you're saying that one horse is the one that's going to win. That what one horse equals 100 accounts. How do you, and it is a big decision. How do you decide who you're not going after?
I've learned the hard way on this too.
Yeah.
Because you're right. Oh, well, what am I leaving on the table if I'm not going after all 100?
Mm-hmm.
Well, you find out pretty quickly that if you're doing mass messaging or if you're not getting hyper-focused, that you're not going to get anybody, right? So you're trying to go after too much. So the same way you have to dial in your ICP, you have to also dial in how you're targeting on a sales and ABM standpoint as well. So it's just being super disciplined of saying, this is the course, this is where I need to go, and being able to say no to certain things too. On the lab side, it's a little easier. Because it's easier to know what are triggers and what, volume that they're doing and who's growing and who's in the space. On the healthcare side, though, that's where it becomes, you have to be very diligent. Is it mid-sized hospitals? What's their tech stack? What's some things that are coming down the pipeline they have to look at?
So do you base your sort of like, okay, the need that we can meet is based on volume and other filters like that?
Yes. So I built a scoring category, 5 different columns, basically creating a scoring list, if you will. And it's, the volume of tests that they're doing. So, it'll be some type of pain point, the growth trajectory as well, because that's what will cause that triggering event or the bottlenecking, and they'll really feel the pain points there. But there's also things like if they start getting reimbursement for certain tests, that's going to cause a huge uptick. And now that data accuracy is going to be even more important because now they have to go and try to get paid for it.
Right.
So there's certain triggers that I look for or certain things that I see that I keep a pulse check on in real time.
Got it. Okay. So, there's a very clear strategy to how you're doing it. And do you mind me asking what sources of data you use for this?
Yeah, a lot of the labs that we work with are public. So you can dive into their financial records and see a lot of things that way. But you could even just use the LLMs now and say, hey, build me a list of top accounts. This is the criteria, and really build a good list from what's even available. It's harder with the private companies, but
you're in a niche within a niche there.
Yeah.
Although 10,000 is not exactly a niche. If you're going after the provider market, if you can afford it, you can get Definitive Health.
Yep.
If you're going after the payer market, it's a bit easier because there aren't that many of them.
Mm-hmm.
With the market that you're going after, great if they've got, if they're publicly traded, right? Because the S2s are out there. What about for the rest? Is there, sure, you can ask the LLMs, but I still I know they're giving me the answer because they know the LLM says, I have to give this person an answer. It will not say, I can't answer that question.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So how do you know, that, what do you look for to say, this is valid?
Yeah. Again, it's creating that hypothesis. So you use, like to your point, those LLMs and making sure that you really know how to prompt it and make sure you get the information that you want out of it. And then it's, again, going back and validating it. And this is, it's not just a static thing. I've had to adjust my list time and time again.
Right.
It's a living, breathing thing that as the product develops, as messaging develops, as you get more insights on your customers, you have to change and continue to evolve. So it's real time. I don't have a perfect solution, but I'm getting closer and closer, I feel.
So you get from 100, so that's down to 20. Is that 20 based on intent?
20 is based on that scoring criteria that I basically built out of saying, these are the ones that I'm putting my head down and going after. And that's what's really helped narrow my focus. And we've gotten, I've since then expanded from the 20, but I started about a year ago. These are the 20 I'm going after.
I'm a big proponent of doing the right level of research that's going to dictate what your sales messaging or what your sales activities and your marketing messaging look like. So for me, to do proper account-based marketing, not only do you need all that intent data that we've talked about, you're going to need really good account research and sort of the upfront motion of executive heat maps. You want to look at what's their technology platforms, what are their existing partner vendors that they've historically worked with, what are the positive, negative press components. So it's almost a secondary question of, if all of this went perfectly for me and we executed this, is this even a good time for them to buy from me? So I think if you clear additional hurdles, then you start to build that messaging around that. And then you start to look at the orchestration between sales and marketing. And that's a whole different can of worms of, okay, we have the right customers or the right ideal customer profile of the mix. We're building our ABM plan around this. Now we need to physically start to go and execute that. And so people and again, the reason I'm harping on this is because I think when people want to do these types of strategies, they want to just go. And they think speed is their friend. Not necessarily, because, especially with a new customer that you may not have the greatest penetration with, or you might not be on their radar, you have a finite window there to make an impression as a new vendor, to unseat an incumbent or whatever you're going for. So I really think understanding the customer to that level is what's needed. And I feel like the alignment at the executive level, all of kind of the pre-research steps that really kind of precede going into account-based marketing are so important. And I think sometimes sales and marketing leads assume that work has been done, and it's not always the case.
Tens of thousands down to 100, 100 down to 20. And notice how Tony builds that list. Value props first, then work backwards to who cares most, then score, then validate. The lookalike approach, built off his best existing customer, is smart and completely replicable. But knowing which accounts to target is only the first part. The second part, and this is where a lot of ABM programs cut corners, is how deeply you understand each account before you ever reach out. Clint uses an AI tool called Poggio to do relationship mapping and account intelligence. Tony does it the more manual way, obsessing over every piece of public information he can find on an account. So let's hear from Clint on using AI for the research phase.
Yeah, so I'll give a plug. There's an AI-based application called Poggio, and
don't know that one.
Yeah. So think of them as almost like a Claude or Chat GPT type application, but it's created through the lens of sales and marketing. So everything we've talked about, a lot of these examples, they're kind of pre-prompted to where you're feeding it, almost like the most elementary level of data. And then it's building out kind of this strategy and almost like the entire account research profile on your behalf. So there are ways to use AI to get all this information. Now, still, what I believe AI will not be able to do is, take these conversations between the sales and the marketing leads and really understand, like, if we go for this and it's cleared all the hurdles and we've got all greens, what's going to be the singular type messaging or the thread that goes between sales and marketing, where that's where you start to get into the motion of account-based marketing, in my opinion.
Yeah, I almost over-prepare. I definitely over-prepare for a lot of these things on the sales meetings and everything else, but I almost get obsessed with that one account. I'll spend hours. I'll look up things that they're posting on social media. I look up their financial records. If they're public, there's a lot of intent that you could pull out of there of what their priorities are. If you look at job postings, you could see who they're hiring for, and they lay out what exactly they need somebody to do. So, using all the stuff that is public on that company, you can build a very good hypothesis of what would be important to them. And then based on that intent could be the timing of when to deliver certain messages as well.
Job postings, financial filings, funding announcements, what their tech stack looks like, who their existing vendors are. Both Clint and Tony are building a picture of each account that goes well beyond what a standard intent data platform gives you. They're modeling the account's world, and they're modeling what's about to change and why this moment might be exactly the right one to reach out, which sets up the question of what you actually say when you do reach out. because even the most carefully researched ABM program can fail on messaging. Both guests had strong views on this, and they come at it from completely different directions. Tony leads with persona-level messaging and the idea that you're not selling a product, you're selling a feeling.
So part of the ABM as well is making sure you tailor it for persona as well, right? So you're going to have the C-suite. You're going to have people on our side, it's operations.
Yeah.
Then you're going to have, the software team, which they get brought in typically on our side. So, but so you have to tailor
So
what you're
you've
telling
got
them.
3 personas within the buying group.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
Got
and
it.
it's typically on the hierarchy of, senior leadership and then the people that are in the weeds doing this every day.
Yeah.
And the messaging is completely different all the way through.
Yeah. And how do you build that messaging?
I build the messaging for the specific account tailored to what that person in that role will care about. So if you're going after a chief operations officer, they're not going to care about time savings. They're going to care about how do I get operational efficiencies? How do I build a scalable motion? The people that are actually doing it are like, I want to have less errors. I want to be able to go home and be done at 5 o'clock and not have to work over. So there's a lot of different pain points at each level we'll have.
And what sort of tactics are you using? Email and social?
It's hard to cut through the noise on the email. There's email. There's the phone calls, there's LinkedIn. We have good luck with LinkedIn. I think that adds a personalized message. Here's a picture of somebody that's reaching out to me. But honestly, it's really about these in-person meetings. Like, so we're here at the Vive conference. It's, seeing people live in person. This is what really helps accelerate some of that, which I know that's not a perfect ABM strategy, but it's hitting them at all angles of just trying to get that almost omnipresence from them.
Got it. So you're basically saying, I'm going after these 20 people each within these 20 organizations.
Yes.
So 400, it's like, you end up with a contact list of 400 to 500 people that you're going after.
Yes.
And then creating individual targeted campaigns to each one's persona set.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. And even more important than that is what you're telling them, right?
Yeah.
So, I've been able to partner or at least get some insights on other startup companies. And I feel like they start off the same way. Here's our features. Check out our features. Well, you have to ask yourself as a customer or a prospect, who cares? Like, I don't care about your feature. Then it's, okay, now you have to change. What does that feature do? Okay, this is the solution, right? This is the solution that provides. Then you take it to the next level. And now you're selling the feeling of that solution. Or you're almost tapping into the emotion of the end user. So, okay, cool. You could save me 10 minutes a day. Well, how about instead of 10 minutes a day, how about you could now enjoy your lunch break? Or now you don't have to worry about, just being stuck doing a job that's you feel like you can never catch up on, right? So it's trying to sell the emotional win that they'll get out of the solution. Because at the end of the day, we're habits of buying on emotion than we are others.
Talk about that. That's very interesting. I was just, talking with somebody where they said, we talked about there's the sort of left brain and right brain, right? So the left brain is very rational. So it's the value proposition.
Yep.
This solution will have X impact, on whatever it is that you're selling. And then there's the other side, which is the emotional aspect of it. So, and that's something which a lot of people, I don't know if that's really that important because, they're very rational buyers. So you don't agree with that?
I think it's multiple different things. There's not a perfect answer to that. But I just think about myself. I put myself in that situation. Like, what would somebody have to tell me to get me to want to buy things, right? So I always am constantly trying to put myself on the other side. And it just goes back to like, what is that solution doing for me? Is it a widget? Is it a tool? What does it mean though? What is it actually doing? So it's more the outcome-based messaging than as opposed to just a feature.
You can sort of get there through volume and not have the right messaging to begin with, And what I mean by that is on the sales side, if you're working kind of the known contacts or the executive hierarchy, and if you're trying the same messages and it doesn't seem to work, and there's not a lot of pivots being made there. And obviously there's no feedback loop going to marketing. So really they're just doubling down on the wrong message to begin with, that you're going to eventually get there just by sheer will. Like, I don't think that happens at all. So I think you have to be very creative as it relates to account-based marketing. I would also say you need a kind of a singular win theme to where if your CFO and maybe your chief medical officer were at the water cooler and your company happened to get brought up, that they can both latch on to one thing. Oh, I remember Sagility. They were talking about XYZ, And I think sometimes that gets lost just by the nature of what these people do within these organizations. And it may seem so different from what that person would value versus what a clinical person would value. Not necessarily the case, So I'd leave you with those two things.
Sell the feeling, not the feature. The COO doesn't want to hear about time savings. She wants to hear about operational scale. The person doing the work every day doesn't want efficiency metrics. She wants to go home at 5 o'clock. And Clint's water cooler test is even starker. If the CFO and the CMO can't both repeat the same message, your win theme isn't clear enough. Which brings us to the final theme: alignment, measurement, and knowing when to pivot. This is where a lot of ABM programs quietly die, not because the account selection was wrong, and not because the messaging was off, but because sales and marketing aren't running the same play, and nobody has a system for knowing when to cut their losses on an account and move on. Tony has a very clear view on what alignment actually looks like in practice, and it starts with a framing that I think will surprise some people.
Right now, we're measuring based on not clicks anymore, not impressions. It's about how many meetings can we actually set up.
Yeah.
And, that's where the market I'm really seeing going is, just hearing from investors and VCs is budgets are tighter now. You can't just throw money at a solution and not get measurable outcomes from it. So how do you do that? And that's where this ABM really, I think, evolved from, as opposed to the big, guerrilla marketing tactics of let's throw ads out everywhere and get a billboard. Those days, are limited for many of these companies. So it's how do we get a direct ROI? And that's where I think ABM it's closer to sales as marketing has ever been.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why I think the sales and marketing teams need to be in a high communication, because their messaging needs to be aligned in order for both of them to be successful.
It's something which anytime you talk to anybody about ABM, they say, the single point of failure is lack of alignment with sales and marketing. And, I've had experience of being in that movie of telling, we're helping a client with ABM and saying, hey, you've got to have the salespeople at the table, and finding the whole thing struggling with it because the salespeople are like, why am I here?
Yeah.
And actually there's one client said, I don't want, just leave sales to me. All right. Just leave it to me. I promise you I'll get them involved at the right time, but you don't want to have them involved, seat at the table. It's not often that we work with companies where we're actually working with the salesperson and then bringing marketing in to help with the execution. We have had situations like that. And actually, I think they're probably some of the most successful ones. What do you think it takes? What's the formula for that alignment to work well?
So one is you have to make sure it's the right person or having the right mindset of the salesman or the marketer. I'm a sales guy. I've been victim to this too, but you don't go to your sales team to say, what product should we build all the time, because they'll say, I lost this one deal one time. We should build that product. And the same goes for marketing, right? You have to make sure that the salespeople or the team that you're hearing from, you're hearing it from multiple different areas. Or I even invite the marketing team to join the sales calls and hear what's happening in real time. We do have tools that can record calls and that sort of thing too. So you don't have to have an ongoing conversation, but us being small, we meet quite a bit. So as things change, we could iterate and change it tomorrow. So it's really just making sure that the marketing team is aligned to what's happening at the ground level, because it's just changing so fast.
Yeah. Again, I think in the frame of account-based marketing, I think you really have to understand what your win themes are across sales and marketing for that. And what I mean by that is if you have as a sales manager and your account executives, let's just use that example on this side of the perspective. You're going after your C-suite, your middle management, and you have certain win themes or whatever you think the differentiation is. Where things get tricky is that's a very specific motion, whatever that is, and whatever that messaging is between calls and meetings and emails or LinkedIn emails. And then if you have your marketing folks that aren't aligned to that type of messaging, but it's like more of the general company, whatever your secret sauce is, that's where I think things kind of get, a little mismatched, and it can cause confusion on the customer's part, which is never great, so sales and marketing gets a bad rap sometimes of not being aligned from that perspective. And I think that's really easy to fix if you're having some sort of regular cadence from the sales side and the marketing side. And I think the other thing too, and again, you can use AI to surface this data, or if you're working through, a singular CRM like a Salesforce and you have your marketing automation tool connected to that, theoretically, you should be getting a feedback loop of what's working and what's not working. So I think when you get into account-based marketing, sometimes that feedback loop, whether it's AI generated or you're just having meetings looking at analytics or whatever, that doesn't happen as frequently as it should. And I also think between sales and marketing, particularly with account-based marketing, you have the tendency to want to go, and this didn't work, and we're going to pivot a million times. I really think there's a certain point where you have to cut sling load and, okay, this did not work for this customer. That doesn't mean it may not work for the next 5 that we're also trying to do it. So I think that a lot of times those pivots are not made and the feedback loop may not be great between sales and marketing. So the data is usually always there. And if that's not, that's really more of a motion of how do we get that? Or we don't have the right workflow tool. But yeah, feedback is key there. And not continuing to hammer the same nail. If it's not working,
Right.
Like I said, that goes back to an original question. Is this a good time for the customer to buy from you? If you did everything perfectly, can you unseat that incumbent? Are the market conditions right? And I don't want to be, I don't want to give like a contrarian view to say, don't go after it. But I think a lot of people sort of like think we're going to do this and it's going to produce results. And there's a sliding scale too of what works at the SMB level through enterprise. And that does not translate on a one-to-one.
I think you have to get obsessed with the pain points and the problems that you're solving. And I think that will help align your strategy on how to get to the right people at the right time. Just obsessing over the pain points that the customers are having and not so much of what your product can do, but what you can solve for the customers is very crucial. And I think that's one of our big differentiators is we understand the customer's pain points better than they do. And we know the implications better than they do. So a lot of our go-to-market motion is educating the market on what the impact we can make. And and the messaging needs to come directly from that.
2 sales executives, 1 consistent argument. ABM works when you've done the work that most people skip. Here are 5 things I think are worth taking away from this conversation. Number 1, validate before you invest. Clint's point about using intent data as a pre-check before you build the program, not after, is one that most companies get backwards. If the signals aren't there, you may be building a plan around an account that isn't ready to buy. Flip that paradigm and you'll know much earlier whether it's worth committing. Takeaway number 2, the account list is a bet. Your target account list isn't a marketing decision. It's a strategic commitment. Tony's discipline of going from tens of thousands to 20, built on a scoring model, lookalike customers and trigger events, is what makes everything downstream worthwhile. The discipline to say no to 99% of your addressable market is what makes the 1% work. 3, obsess over the account before you touch a tactic. Executive heat maps, job postings, financial filings, funding announcements. Both Clint and Tony are building a picture of each account that goes far beyond what an intent platform will tell you. That research is what makes the outreach feel relevant instead of random. 4, you're not selling a product, you're selling an outcome. Tony's framework, features to solutions to the emotional win, is a clean audit for any piece of content or outreach you're running right now. Clint's water cooler test for your win theme is even simpler. If both the CFO and the CMO can't repeat it, it isn't clear enough. 5, and this is pretty controversial, marketing aligns with sales, not the other way around. In a sales-led ABM program, the job of marketing is to support and amplify what's working on the ground. That requires marketing to be in the room, or at minimum, listening to the calls. The teams that have genuinely cracked ABM are the ones where this distinction no longer matters because they're effectively operating as one unit. A big thank you to Clint and Tony for being so open and so practical about this. I hope you found it useful. I know I did. And if you did, please share it with a colleague who's wrestling with their ABM program right now. It might save them a lot of wasted effort. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe on whatever app you're using. It really makes a difference to us. And by the way, if you want to talk about anything related to B2B healthcare marketing, especially ABM, you can book a call with me using the link below. There's nothing for sale. I'm genuinely happy to chat and bounce ideas. I'm Adam Chirinos, and I'll see you on the next episode.